Hey, Kelsie.
Hey, Brooke.
Want to tell everyone what's happening in today's episode?
Today we're going to talk about how Muslim immigrant children in the United States have a really hard time accessing public education, and especially Muslim girls. And then we're going to talk about the history of Muslim women.
Oh my gosh, those are very interesting topics.
Yes.
Let's get into it.
Hello, and welcome to Remedial Herstory, the other 50%, the podcast that explores what happened to the women in history class. Now, here's your host, Kelsie Brooke Eckert, and her partner in crime, Brooke Neva Sullivan.
Episode 25, Muslim girls and their history.
Okay.
Boom. Brooke, Happy New Year!
I know, you too. Happy 2021.
Happy 2021. We have been greeted with stressful grant deadlines.
Yes, we have some really big things coming up with
very big things
with
coming
Remedial
up.
Herstory, and we have not really talked about it on the podcast.
No.
Of all the really cool things that you're doing.
I know, and I kind of want to leave it like pending.
Yeah, no,
but
we
if people
more to come.
People go to the website, you'll see.
Yeah.
YouTube channel coming.
Yep.
Blog posts coming.
Yep.
Lots of exciting things.
I feel like I've said this to you already, but I love the A team of women that you're assembling for all this stuff. Like we have
baller women.
Oh my god, these are really kick-ass women that are leaders in their industry. I mean,
Dr. Alicia Gutierrez Roman.
Oh my god, she's amazing.
Amazing. Dr. Barbara Tischler.
I mean, amazing women that are all in. They were like, yeah, of course I'll help you. What do you need? Which I think speaks volumes about who you are and what you're doing, but also the road ahead that you're paving, people want to be a part of, which is really cool.
Well, we're paving. You're with me here.
I mean, I get to ride. I'm on the wagon, but I'm definitely not riding the Oregon Trail.
I don't know what that means, because if you're in the wagon, you're going.
I'm going, but...
You are going to be part of the Donner Party, whether you want to or not.
But I don't want my cows to get dysentery. I'm just kidding. No, I want to be part of it. I just don't want to eat the people.
Fair enough.
Everyone makes choices.
I'll eat the people.
What?
No, I just went down. This is a bad metaphor.
Bring it back.
I blame you.
So sorry. I want to ride in any wagon that you're on with this baller group of women that you're assembling. The board is awesome that you're creating for the nonprofit. I get to be there. I am a part of it. I'm on the board.
Woohoo!
Which is so cool. And I don't know. It's amazing. You're doing some incredible work. And I'm really excited about what we get to share with our audience coming up of what 2021 has in store, because 2020 was really cool for the podcast.
Yeah. And 2021 is going to be even better.
I know. The lineup that we have in store for this year is blowing my mind. I'm very excited.
Get ready.
Yeah. But I did see a meme yesterday that I had to share with you. And it was basically I've only been in 2021 for 7 days, and I already want my refund. My free trial is over. Which I just was where's the customer service line?
So as a teacher, the last day or so has been fascinating. And granted, I will tell everybody we're recording a little bit in advance of Monday's release.
Yeah.
So the raid on the Capitol, the terrorist
was yesterday.
attack.
Today is Thursday, but this is coming out on Monday.
Has just happened. And so today in class, I processed that out loud with, 40 students who are really concerned about the fate of democracy in our country.
Which they should be, rightfully. Yep. That would be, I can't even imagine being in high school and trying to process that. I can remember being in high school trying to process 9/11, and it was the first time I heard the word terrorist.
Yep.
And I can remember trying to figure out,
the concept of a foreign terrorist is okay, well, they just hate America.
Mean? Yeah, these are people who live here, who think that they're doing the right thing for our country.
Yeah. And they just attacked our Capitol building.
And the president told them to
Senate
do it.
buildings.
Yeah, that.
I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, it's been overwhelming.
Right. Well, I was talking to another teacher, and she was saying that she is very concerned about going back to school. She was very concerned about going back to school.
Yeah.
Interacting with her students, and what that means. How is she, she's very nervous. In schools, we pride ourselves on being able to negotiate tricky conversations with
Yeah.
kids. And how is she supposed to have this conversation about people? Like, sure, it's Republican, Democrat, fine, these are Trump supporters, and that's a Republican candidate or something, and you're supposed to be open to all sides. But there's a line, and, you know, I am grateful to people like Mitch McConnell and other people who have at least said, like, okay, there's a line, you know? Like,
Yeah,
like I was wondering
too...
with him where the line
Oh my gosh, I was
was.
wondering with a lot of Republicans where they were landing on this. And I also found a list of all of the Republicans who were trying to recount the votes in their states and things like that. And I'm like, you probably wouldn't be in office if the election was rigged, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
there's so many, like, basic questions where I'm like, wait,
Yeah.
how are you elected then if the election was rigged?
Right.
And so it's one of those things where I'm like, anyone who's questioned this process
Yeah.
is now being called to question.
Right.
Now this
because
is your
it's like
responsibility.
we're
You're
in-
inciting this riot because you're not giving clear facts.
Right.
And you're using
But
the
also,
media to
I mean,
manipulate.
holy moly, the last couple days as a social studies teacher
Yeah.
has been complete validation for the need for my job.
Yes.
This
And
is what I
education.
do.
Yeah.
Like, holy God, people, social studies matters.
Yeah.
And I will add that in the last month, I found out that during COVID, they are not teaching social studies K to 6 in my school district, period. That or science. Because science and social studies apparently don't matter in the elementary school level. And I watching the news this week, I went,
There's never been a year in the planet that science and history have mattered more. I'm sorry. A global pandemic has taken over, and we are now asking you to take a vaccine. Science. And your democracy has been threatened, and your capital has been taken down. History.
let's go, people. Get on board. Where have you been?
That's just, I mean,
It was a lot.
that's
But
super frustrating.
I'm
I'm
really
sure.
grateful that you made the parallel, although there are obvious differences, but there is a parallel here to be drawn between the experience that students had on 9/11 of not really understanding what's going on
Total
and
ignorance.
what happened this past week. And I want to transition to talking about Islam on that note.
Okay.
Because you might remember that after 9/11, many Americans had an awakening to the fact that Islam is
A religion?
A religion, first of
Yeah.
all. Second of all, it is the second largest world religion.
Right.
Thirdly, there's a huge Muslim population in the United States, and especially here in New Hampshire. We
Yeah, we have a huge community.
we have a huge community in Manchester and in other smaller New Hampshire cities, and 9/11. I remember, and you might recall, seeing bumper stickers that said things to the effect of, "All I need to know about Islam, I learned on 9/11." Do you remember that?
No.
Yeah. So,
But New Hampshire loves a good bumper sticker, so maybe it was just so different in time. Connecticut, we're a little more like, our cars have value.
Can't put that on my Porsche.
No. The BMW doesn't get a bumper.
Doesn't no bumper?
No bumper stickers.
Well, up here we're wicked into our bumper stickers.
And your vanity plates. Good God. I say ours now. They're our vanity plates because I'm a New Hampshire resident.
Welcome.
Thanks, man. Anyways,
Well-
so I don't remember seeing those, but I do remember a lot of it, like anti-Islam activity and,
Yeah,
and,
and actually-
racist activity towards that, and it was absurd.
Hate crimes against Muslims
Yeah, anti-Semitic.
skyrocketed after 9/11, and they gradually declined, and then around the election of Donald Trump, they went back up again.
Oh, that's so weird.
I know that's really
I'm, like,
shocking
so
information.
surprised.
I just wanted to
You
make
just,
sure you
blew
were.
me away with a fun fact.
Yeah. So I bring that up because today we're going to talk about Islam, and I brought on a wonderful guest. Her name is Suzan Al Abidi.
Okay.
And she and I'm going to tell you our story.
Okay.
We know each other.
Okay.
Personally.
Well, I love that.
Okay. So Suzanne was, and this is both a story about Islam as well and the life of a Muslim immigrant, but it's also the story that many of our students who are bilingual experience. Suzanne is an incredibly smart woman, and her husband, so she got married and moved to the United States with her husband. And they settled first in New Mexico and then moved here to New Hampshire.
How old was she when she moved here?
I want to say 30s, maybe late 20s. But they moved to the United States, came to New Hampshire eventually after her husband got his doctorate. And he got a job here at Plymouth State University in New Hampshire. And he was a math professor at the university here. Yep. And in his role, he actually got all of his family members free classes. And so Suzanne started pursuing her doctorate because she was like, hell yeah, I'm doing this. And so I met Suzanne along this journey, this life story, as she is pursuing her master's degree here in the United States. And so here's a woman who grew up in Jordan. Her family's Palestinian. She is Sunni Muslim, which...
There's a lot of different
branches of Islam. So if you're not familiar, the two major branches are Sunni and Shia. And the Sunni branch is the larger branch.
Is it still geo-focused of whether or not you're Sunni or Shiite?
It is not. Yes, yeah, definitely. The geography plays a big role.
Yeah, like isn't it like north and south?
No, it's more like
metropolitan rural.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Oh,
but different countries are predominantly one
or the other.
Or the other.
Yeah,
yeah. And so she's from Jordan, predominantly Sunni, and she, but is now, over the course of her time here in New Hampshire, she became an American citizen. She pursued her master's, got it, and was beginning to work towards her doctorate in education. And this is where we started to cross paths. And so Suzanne and I started taking a class together. It was an educational law class.
Ooh, fun.
And this class...
I can't imagine you had any rowdy debates in there.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that was amazing. But what cracked me up about this experience was the first day, the professor was talking about Brown versus Topeka Board of Education. Okay? Which, if you're not familiar, this is the Supreme Court case that desegregated schools in the United States.
And it's Texas, right?
This is Kansas.
Okay.
Topeka, Kansas. So desegregate schools. So if you didn't know the specific Supreme Court case, most students who went through high school in the United States probably learned about
Topeka versus Brown.
Or learned the segregation of schools.
Okay.
Right? They might have learned about civil rights. They might have learned about our long history with, racism in this country.
Sure.
And all those things.
Someone coming from outside of America.
So a student from Jordan is sitting in the room and she goes, where's this? Kansas. And where's that? So it's like in the middle there. Okay. And what is it? So this girl wanted to go to school, but she couldn't because she was African American. Okay. Why? Because we had laws and they were messed up and wrong, and that's problematic. Okay. And so, why? Right? And so now I'm like, okay, well, so we're in this class, and this poor woman is trying to follow a conversation about the specific law
that was
argued, in this particular case, right? This is a high-level class. Like, they're not teaching civil rights history. They're teaching about
not getting into the granular
law.
Yeah.
They're looking at the legal arguments that are being made, right? So this isn't about like whether whether segregation, right, was right or wrong. Like, it's wrong, but how do you argue it legally, right, based on the law? Like, that's a different question. And so that's what we're getting into in this class. So poor Suzanne is sitting there. She's like, I don't know where Kansas is. I don't know what civil rights means.
Yeah, the baseline.
So, to her credit, Suzanne is like, I need help. And that lady across the room is a history teacher.
She's like, look at that girl. I think she'll be my friend.
Yeah, so we became friends, and mostly because Suzanne hunted me down and was like, you're going out to coffee with me, and we're going to talk history, apparently, because I need to learn that.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so we went and we started this tradition of I teach her history so that she can help get through this law class.
Yeah.
And she can understand at least the context in which these cases are occurring. And Brown versus Topeka is just one of many cases that we were dissecting in this class. And I mean, by the end of it, she had a full course in U.S. history.
Ugh.
And that was the beginning of our friendship. Soon, though, Suzanne has completed all these preliminary courses, and she is now ready to pursue her own doctorate. And she's getting her doctorate in education. She wants to write her lit review, and she ends up completely changing where she's going.
Okay.
And so I ended up helping Suzanne out as like an editor on her dissertation. And she did her project on her dissertation on the experience of Muslim students, young people, and the effect that this has on them as they are immigrating to the United States. And it's
great topic.
It's an amazing topic.
Now I'm interested. Like, what does she learn? What does she talk about? I'm so curious.
Yeah. So I got a chance to sit down with her, and I'm going to have her introduce herself to everybody. So this is what she said.
Okay. So my name is Suzan Al Abidi. I'm originally from Jordan. I married in 2006, and I went to the United States with my husband. And I got my 4 kids in the United States. I have 2 daughters and 2 sons, and my oldest is 13. My youngest is 5. In 2011, first of all, I have bachelor degree in nutrition, and then 2011, I started master's degree. I did it in health education, health promotion. And then I pursued my EDD education, so doctoral degree in education, curriculum and instruction. Then when I finished, we moved to Jordan, and then I got a job in UAE. So now I am a professor at Al Ain University and Department of Education.
So when we were beginning her research process, one of the things that was really hard is that because Muslims have only recently, in large numbers, begun, and by recently I mean like the 1950s, 60s. Okay, so like mid 20th century, you see a huge population of Muslims begin to immigrate to the United States, and increasingly so since then. And because of that, not a lot of research on the Muslim experience has actually been done for her to base her research
Makes
off
sense.
of.
Yeah.
So I asked her to explain what was known when she started doing her research.
Which would probably be pretty limited, I imagine.
It was very limited. It was hard.
So I started with writing my dissertation about children obesity in rural low-income communities, and then I ended up with another topic. So my dissertation was, if I want to mention now the title, it's about a mother's perspective, or it's from the mother's perspective, about the factors influencing well-being, wellness of Muslim children in the Northeastern United States. So, and if I wanted to give a little background about this topic, there is 3 to 7 million Muslims in the U.S., okay? And Muslim immigrants from 80 different countries. So most Muslims have immigrated in the second half of the 20th century, and increasingly more since September 11. But the total number of U.S. Muslims is unclear. It's estimated that there are between 2 to 7 million Muslims in the United States. And that's why this topic, I felt it's important, because there is, I can say, good numbers of Muslims in the United States. And of surveyed Muslims, between 65 and 75 of American Muslims are immigrants from diverse countries across North Africa, Middle East, South Asia. And American Muslims differ in their religious practices. For example, 50 are Sunni, 22 are Shia, and 16 are, we don't know exactly what they are. 75% speak English, and they are most of them are from Middle East. 45% of Muslims who are living in the United States have a bachelor's degree, and they are from higher median income than other immigrants group who came from Middle East. I'm talking about who came from Middle East.
So there's very minimal research out there.
Yeah, it sounds that way.
For her to tap into. And what was really tricky as she's trying to design this study that she's going to do is figuring out how to even study it. Because what she's really curious about, and she's a mom, she's got 4 kids, and
she's going for a doctorate.
And she's working on a doctorate.
Ugh,
and
I need a life. Just kidding. Good for you, Suzanne.
She's amazing. But she's trying to figure out, how's she even going to design a study around this?
Yeah, like how is it measurable? And what do you want it to say?
Exactly. And you've got lots of Muslim immigrants here. She's connected because she and her family attend the mosque down in Manchester.
Yep.
And so, so she's connected to some extent. But how do you do this in a measurable academic way? And the other problem is she wants to really, she was interested in researching the impact it had on kids because she's a mom and she wants to know what her children are experiencing. Right? Yeah. She doesn't know what they are experiencing. She didn't go through public school here. Like, she doesn't know what their life is like.
Yeah.
And so she wanted to be more informed about that. So she ends up looking at this from her background is in wellness and nutrition.
Okay.
And so she wants to know how this transition is impacting the wellness, the well-being of these children. And she ends up looking
That's a really hard thing to answer.
Right?
Like, how do you measure well-being? Yeah. I'm so curious. Like, what did she decide was a measurable thing?
So that was really complicated, and she ends up doing like a qualitative study.
Okay. Well, that makes more sense. You can't go data points.
Right. It's tricky.
Yeah.
So she ends up surveying the mothers of these children because there was also issues with like minors and them being involved in the research. So she asks a lot of questions about basically what is impacting the wellness of these children, and this is what she found.
Let's start. There were 2 research questions that guided me through this research. Okay, the first one was what factors influence wellness among Muslim children living in Northeastern United States. So here I'm talking about the factors that impact their wellness, right? Yeah. And then the second question was, how do Muslim mothers mediate the many challenges that impact wellness in order to support their children's well-being? So if you want me to talk about the factor, what impacted their wellness, I found like many factors. The first one was discrimination. Through interviewing the mothers, I interviewed the mothers to talk information about their children. So they talked on behalf of their children. So I found discrimination one of the factors that impacted their wellness. Then the another factor was cultural friction. The third factor was apprehension. The fourth factor was lacking awareness of Islam. Then the misalignment. This is the 5 factors that impacted children's wellness in Northeastern United States. So within the cultural friction, like they felt like a little bit like they are not doing what everyone else is doing. Okay, so for example, some children, like in my study, for example, they didn't go to the school dance because it was mixed gender. So they found themselves like different. They are so they feel like they are not doing what everyone else is doing. For Halloween, for example, their families refused that their children to do the Halloween costume and something like that. So they felt like it's a big challenge for them this is like, I can tell you some examples of the mother's world, like it's a big challenge for me to convince my kids that we don't do this for Halloween. So this is cultural reflection.
So, I mean, these three big things, discrimination, cultural fiction, and lack of understanding of Islam, are serious issues that these kids are experiencing. And they're kids. Like, how is a 7-year-old supposed to navigate complex discrimination issues?
I mean, they're not. And, they're going to be present for the things that are happening, like Halloween.
Right.
You know, and try to participate as much as they're allowed to. I don't know. And you as the parent have to do somewhat of some simulation to helping them feel comfortable but at the same time not lose your cultural
identity.
Who
you are.
Yeah. So I don't know. I saw this really funny, actually really sweet. This kid's best friend was Muslim, and so he couldn't celebrate Halloween. So the kid dressed up in a suit.
Yeah.
And all of the other kids pretended to be the Secret Service, and he was the president, the one child that was Muslim, so that he could go out on Halloween with all of them. So you have all these, 7 and 8-year-old boys, pretending they have earpieces and, the aviator glasses, covering the president.
Yeah.
It was really sweet and inclusive, and how they got a friend to, enjoy an event that they're not necessarily allowed to partake in. So.
Yeah.
It was just really cute.
Well, and Halloween is a really good example of cultural fiction. She found that many Muslim parents talked about that in her research, which is interesting.
Well, it's probably the one that shows up. I mean, that and Christmas, I would imagine, are probably the two harder ones. But it definitely shows up, especially when... Wait, hang on. Is Muslim Ramadan?
Yep.
Yeah. So especially when they're dealing with Ramadan and... other students don't know that that's going on.
Yeah.
And they're doing their fasting.
Yeah, so let's hold on that, because she talks about that a great deal.
Okay.
Because, that is an educational structure. That is, not... and it just reminds me of all of the holidays that Muslim students and students of other religions can't participate in, because our entire school structure
is Christian.
Is designed around Christianity. We have a week of Christmas vacation.
Oh my gosh,
we literally call it Christmas vacation.
Yeah.
We don't call it winter break.
Well, and it's not like other holidays coincide with Christmas vacation. Occasionally, Hanukkah.
Hanukkah was the week before Christmas vacation.
And then,
poor Jewish kids are sitting out in class during Hanukkah.
I can remember that. And then you have Jehovah's Witnesses who do not celebrate or recognize any of those major holidays.
Yeah.
So it's just a lot. Someone said this really interesting comment to me about Kamala Harris being in office now that we'll finally get the Jewish holidays off. And I was like, it's a point.
It's a point.
I mean, who doesn't want more vacation days? But good for Jewish people to have finally their holidays celebrated in public schools.
Yeah. Or any, I think the challenge is, we don't need to take every day off from school, but we do need to make sure that
people feel that they can remove themselves when it is major religious holidays in their culture.
Right. So I asked her point blank, here in New Hampshire, we have 93% of our population are white, Caucasian.
Yeah.
Either mostly non-religious, but
they practice
probably
Christmas.
Christianity, it to some extent.
Yeah.
So great, that is how do kids navigate that, and what kind of discrimination are they experiencing here in New Hampshire? And her research actually exposed a lot.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think this is pretty true across the country?
So her research is, true to academia, and so she only
did this.
This is
small
what
group.
we found in New Hampshire.
Okay.
But New Hampshire is unique, right? Like I said, 93% of the population in New Hampshire is white, Caucasian, Christian, most likely, and so that creates a very unique
experience
for somebody who's coming in as a minority. You are probably the only person, if you're in one of the rural communities, which is basically everything outside of Manchester covered, right? You have a very unique experience coming here, and the people around you do not know anything about
your culture.
Have no lived experiences of your culture.
Yeah.
So this is what she said.
Yes, I remember one mother told me that her son, one of her son's colleague told him, like, go back to your country. Okay. Another one, go back to your country. One of them, actually, and I didn't try this in my dissertation because my daughters experienced that, and I don't want it to be like a bias or something like that. When Trump won, few students like, oh, you will get out from our country. One of the mothers told me that, but did you remember Zaina? And I remember her principal called us and she said, no, they will be okay and something like that. But my daughters, like when Trump won, they were very upset. And they cried, oh, Mama, we will be kicked from the U.S. and something like that.
So I'm trying to wrap my mind around telling a 7-year-old, go back to your country. And, like, what does that even mean? Like, what is their country at this point?
And what's your country? White Caucasian, go back to England.
Yeah.
This actually isn't your country. Right. I always love when I hear that from white Americans. I'm like actually... You're on
Pemigewasset land, kiddo. Get out of here.
It turns out you're on native land. So if you want to start with A, you might want to know your history first.
Right, seriously.
And also, like, when people say those things, I don't know. It just, young kids saying that, they've heard it somewhere else.
Right.
So
no kids originate those things. So that's coming from
discrimination?
Adults.
Are you kidding? Like, that's a learned behavior. Ugh, that poor kid to go through it. But it's also, is it weird that there's like comfort to know that they're not alone, that other students who have come to America, first generation Muslim immigrants, have also been through that same experience? So there's a community of people to support.
I mean, she did talk a bit personally when we were researching together and hanging out at the coffee shop and things like that, going down to the mosque every week was like very meaningful.
I'm sure, to have a touchstone and a community that you could feel like you can share those experiences and the trials and the uncomfortableness.
Well, and one thing that she expressed in a private conversation at one point was that because she was Muslim, there were, several other Muslim families in the community. And so people would be like, oh, you should hang out with so-and-so. And she'd be like, yeah, but, like, they're Shia and I'm Sunni, and, like, just because we're both Muslim and we both wear headscarves, like, doesn't mean that we, like...
Turns out,
have
not going to be friends.
Like, yeah, like, we don't...
No, like, I can remember being at Dartmouth College, and when a majority of my job was to hire diverse and underrepresented minority groups. It was, like, a big piece of how we would try to attract talent to the organization. And... I can remember setting up an interview for someone. And they're like, well, he's Hispanic, so we should definitely have him meet with this person because they're Hispanic. I'm like, just because they're the only two Hispanic people that work here doesn't mean they have to be friends.
Right.
Like, what else do they have in common? I was like, I didn't meet another white mom when I got here. And they're like, yeah, but we just want people to feel like they have a culture here. And I'm like, one person does not equate a culture.
Right.
I was like, I don't know that that's really... necessary, but we did it all the time, and it was like so uncomfortable to the point where I was like, this is ridiculous. We don't have to introduce the one other like African American to the other African American that are from like one's from Kentucky and another one is from like Texas.
Yeah,
it's like
cool. They have
nothing in common other than that their skin color is the same. I was like, it's just we're making connections for people that are unnecessary, and you're trying to be culturally sensitive, but it's coming off really racist.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, but it's not surprising because people try and help. They think they're helping. They think like, I'm helping you create a bond and a friendship with someone of kin.
Yeah.
And it's like, no. You just basically put us in a group that now we're going to be a hate group against whoever just made us have this meeting.
Oh my gosh.
So it's like they just backfired. But I get what you're trying to do. And it's the challenge that when you are in a majority white state we're running into.
Yeah.
When we are trying to say we're trying to be culturally sensitive, we're trying to, bring more diversity to the community, all of these things, we're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And we're doing it really insensitively. And without even talking to the people or the culture that we're trying to invite.
To be introduced to this person?
Like that we're trying to invite to the community. I have one other Muslim friend. I don't know, would that be helpful for you to meet them? If not, I'm just suggesting it.
I can be your friend. You know, like that's
I'm good. Are you okay with me being Christian? Like, is that cool for you?
We had Suzanne and I had lots of conversations about our, religious histories and different histories, and I think that's amazing. And like I grew up Christian, and that's a very different lived life experience, and yet so many things are similar between Christianity and Islam, and you don't know that till you talk to people, and that was amazing.
And you just can't build in those assumptions, and I think that's what we're trying to get at with this little boy saying that, or little girl, like their classmate saying this to this child. It's like, they don't know.
Right.
And they're learning that from somewhere. And if that's going to propel throughout and continue, that people are going to continue to say these really racist or, insensitive things, we just need to start calling it out.
Yeah. So the reason I became interested in talking about Suzanne's research here on our podcast is because the deeper she got into her research, the more it deviated from what you might sadly expect as discriminatory comments about Halloween and things like that. And I realized that this is actually a feminist issue that women need to be involved in. And one of the things that she started to talk about and started to realize in her research is that young girls in particular were impacted by cultural differences that were not accommodated by public schools.
Okay.
So I'll let Suzanne explain this in a second, but the question that I asked her is, how did this impact wellness? And one of the things that stood out to me is that young girls in particular struggled because in Islam, women don't go to co-ed, in predominantly Muslim cultures, like in Jordan, where Suzanne's from. If you're going to like a yoga class, for example, there are no men in that class. It's a women's
It's not co-ed.
class. It's not co-ed. You don't do that. You don't have co-ed PE classes. You're not exercising and sweating and breathing hard and wearing skimpy shorts in front of boys. And everything is gender divided in predominantly Muslim cultures where she grew up. And so what she started to uncover is that the impact that this type of stuff had not only was impacting Muslim children broadly in some negative ways, but it also is having a unique impact on Muslim girls because they are having to wear sweatpants and headscarves in PE class.
Their cultural morality is being challenged in those moments where it's like,
like all of their friends are wearing, and it's not like we forget that like Muslim kids are still kids. Like they're 9 years old. They just want to fit in with their friends.
Right.
But they also want to be Muslim.
Well, and they want to be part of their family and their culture and where you come from. Yeah. And
we believe in religious freedom in this country.
Yeah.
And so here's a girl trying to fit in, but also go to PE class where she has to wear a headscarf and sweatpants.
Well, I think it's, it was 2019 when Nike started to come out with hijabs finally.
Yeah.
It's like
2019.
Yeah. Like these women have been working out in hijabs that are like way hotter. Right. And you just figured this out, this huge athletic brand, that this was something you needed in 2019.
Like, welcome to the party.
Yeah, like, where have you been? I don't know.
So let me play what she said when I asked her what impact did this transition have on student wellness, because the answer is broad, but I think if you pay attention to what impact it had on girls, you'll see that there's something really profound here.
Okay, so here we can talk about two different themes or two different factors that impacted their wellness. When I talk about lacking awareness of Islam, I can give you an example. which is like a student ask a Muslim student, like, can I wear your headscarf for Halloween? So, like, they don't have, I will not a big idea, like an enough idea about Islam. Muslim girls here, they cannot sometimes participate in physical education classes because they have to wear shorts, and they cannot wear shorts in front of boys. Okay, this is one point. Another point, and this is this second point also, we can also combine the misalignment and with the lack of awareness of Islam. I'm talking here about the halal food at schools. So Muslim kids cannot eat pork. Meat should be butchered in a specific way. So we have at the beginning of the year, we have to go to school and we have to tell them that our kids 1, 2, 3 have to eat 4, 5, 6. Okay. Another point that really shocked me when I interviewed the mothers, and it's again combined the two factors: the misalignment and the lack of Islam. Is when one mother told me that her son didn't go to the bathroom at schools because in Islam we have to wash the area when we use the bathroom, and we have a specific thing to do that in our bathrooms, and this is not available in bathrooms at schools. So her stopped eating at. Actually, two mothers mentioned this point, and I'm talking about 2 mothers out of 7 mothers, which is, I think, good percentage. So they didn't eat at school. This is one point, and this will affect their intellectual wellness, and at the same time, they have constipation, severe constipation, and this really impacted their physical wellness. Another point, there is no space and no time to pray at school. Mm-hmm. And this is, again, combined 2 factors: misalignment and lack of awareness of Islam. So I used to go to my kids' teacher and to ask them that my daughter has to pray at this time, and actually they cooperate with us. Really, they cooperated with us, and they were very nice. But there is no specific room to pray. Another point, Friday, we have to go every Friday at Dhuhr to pray at Dhuhr. So this is mandatory for men and boys to go. So there is no break to allow them to go and pray. This is, again, misalignment and lack of awareness of Islam.
For lesson plan ideas and how to teach women's history, go to our website, www.remedialherstory.com. You can also follow us on Instagram or Facebook. If you think what we're doing is needed, please consider joining our Patreon community. Through Patreon, you can sponsor a podcast with a small donation. Patrons get access to behind-the-scenes information, gear, and bonus episodes. Patreon allows you, the listener, to ensure that the shows you love continue. This episode is sponsored by our patrons: Kent and Jamie Heckel from Ohio, Leah Tanger from Connecticut, Sarah Reardon from New Hampshire, Barbara Tisler from New York, Mark Breyer from wherever his van has wandered, Jeffrey Ecker and Brooke Neva Sullivan from right here next to me. Thank you so much for your contributions to this podcast. You make it possible. So she talks about a whole bunch of things in there, like participation in PE, which we mentioned, but she also talks about like lack of awareness and the Halloween costumes, which you mentioned before. Yeah. She talks about how they don't have halal food in the cafeteria, and so these kids can't eat, and there are kids not going to the bathroom, and they stop eating because they're not getting food that they're allowed to eat, right? Their parents have said, like, you can't eat this type of stuff, and so they're not eating it. So that's really concerning in terms of a health situation. And then the other thing is, like, schools don't build public schools. We've almost taken separation of church and state to the point where we're like pro-atheism.
Right.
And that's still not.
Yeah.
That's a belief system. You know, like
it is a belief system, but
it's a lack of belief system.
Yeah,
and
it's
so
going in the
you can't
opposite
promote
direction.
That, you know, like that's you can't, you know, and so that's a little fascinating. And these kids are supposed to be praying multiple times a day during public school hours.
Right.
And so when are they supposed to do that? And I, as a teacher, I know that when I have 21 students who have one need and one student who has another need, it's really hard to be like, well, of course you can go pray. I'm fine if you do that.
But you're going to miss out.
But, like, class continues because of our school schedule that we have that I have to follow. And maybe I'm an asshole, but I don't really know how to navigate that.
Well, yeah, and nor should you, which is really hard, but it's also, it's exactly that. It's exactly what you mentioned before, that separation of church and state has gone almost to the point of exhaustion where we don't allow for any religion
Right.
to represent.
Except Christmas.
And even that has been really kind of, in some schools, is not even represented. There's
Right.
definitely schools that don't recognize Christianity or the holidays. Like, they
Right.
don't celebrate Easter. There's none, like, all the things where you don't have those days off.
Right.
And so, and that, it almost is like, what's better? What is the right thing to do?
Right.
Not celebrate any and say you take off the time you need
Right.
and kids miss school.
Right.
Or you pause for the ones of the majority. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a
and
good...
Then, and then the minority loses out. Like, what happened to protecting the minority? Right?
Yeah,
That's
and like,
concerning to me.
That's a really hard question. And it must be incredibly hard as a parent to raise a child of a religion that is not represented in their education.
Right. Yes. And I think that's a huge factor because while Muslim history in the United States, and granted, like, we kind of divide in public schools, we divide history classes between U.S. history and world history. Muslim history in the United States picked up in the 20th century, and it should be taught in schools. We should talk about this trend of Muslim immigration to the United States. There are tons of pictures of Muslim immigrants coming over in the post-World War II era that you could incorporate and show, like, what these people were coming over dressed like, and what they looked like, and what their lives were like. I mean,
and their experiences were lived.
Yeah. So there's a lot there. But I think you're right. Like, school does not work around Islam.
No.
And so...
Even work
doesn't work
in the United States
Islam.
doesn't. No, like, I think about previous coworkers. I worked with several Muslim Americans at Dartmouth, and Ramadan would come up. That is a really hard time to show up as your whole self to an office building when you're fasting all day.
Yeah. So Ramadan, the dates of that holiday change, but it is weeks long.
Weeks
where
long.
people are fasting.
Till sunset. And
then they eat with their family.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a holiday. It's a celebration.
But it's also like a time of season for them. So similar how Christmas season is for most, Christian Americans. You are kinder, you're gentler. There's a better patience. There's just a better aura of being in the world because you're coming out with it's like, oh, it's Christmas season. Like, let's just be better.
Yeah.
That's how Ramadan is. And so when they're trying to be better and it falls in like the
finals.
Yeah, it's like the time of year of like end of school and like the end of semesters, and people are just like at their absolute wits end because we haven't had a vacation since Christmas.
Yeah, like this is not
good
when you
people.
should be fasting in U.S. culture.
No, so that must be it. I mean, it was challenging for the coworkers I worked with. And, you try and be sensitive and eat your lunch at your desk so that they don't see you eating food. And, like, you just try and think about ways that you're like, would you like to go for a walk at lunch instead of eating? And they're like, yeah, let's do that. It's like you try to be supportive and sensitive, but I've never gone through something like that. I've never practiced that kind of devotion to my religion. So I don't know, but it's... must be incredible. And then you think about their children going to school in those moments.
Yeah.
I can't imagine being a high schooler and going through Ramadan.
Right. I know. It's crazy.
When all of your peers are not.
Right.
I think it would be a way easier task if everyone was in it together.
Well, so probably not surprisingly, this was something that she and I talked about in our conversation.
Oh, great.
And she shared that like many people were concerned about, in her research, were concerned about Ramadan. This is what she said.
And a lot of examples, Kelsie. If I want to talk about our holidays, our holidays, they don't have break. They don't have holidays for our holiday. They have to go to school, or they will miss the school and celebrate with us. Ramadan, fasting. They have to fast a specific age. And like teachers, sometimes the teachers call parents, your daughter is fasting, this will impact her. The mothers had to explain to them, because we are in Ramadan, they have to do this and do that. Please don't allow them, like, it's okay if they don't participate in physical education class. We have to explain every single thing. Again, because of misalignment and a lack of awareness of Islam.
So, obviously, Ramadan is problematic. And one thing that I haven't shared about Suzanne is that following, when she finished her dissertation, she and her family, and this was one of the saddest days of my life, she packed up her 4 kids and she and her family moved back to Jordan.
No.
They had just become U.S. citizens. I had helped her pass her citizenship exam.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, was a hilarious experience.
Oh, I imagine.
Because
what they determine a U.S. citizen to know.
Yeah. So as a U.S. history teacher, this was murder, because she was like, the citizenship exam requires that you know, for example, who wrote the Declaration of Independence. And so she was like, okay, well, I know that it's Thomas Jefferson, because she's really good at like learning.
She should be, yeah.
Also, that's just like a straight memorization question.
Yeah.
So she says, yeah, Thomas Jefferson, I know that. And I said, do you know who Thomas Jefferson is? Nope. Do you know anything about him? Nope. Do you know that he owned slaves? Nope. Do you know what the Declaration of Independence said? Nope. Do you know... Like, she doesn't know anything about the Declaration of Independence, but she knows Thomas Jefferson wrote it, so I guess she's good. Citizen, moving on. Like,
It's
what is this exam?
Bizarre. It should be like, do you know that you have to pay taxes? Yeah, no, that exam is a little ridiculous. I read their questions because I was doing a trivia night with my team, and I threw a bunch of them on there, and I was like, turns out you guys are no longer U.S. citizens.
Yeah, like, seriously. I mean, I used to require it for my seniors. Like, you have to pass the exam in order to graduate my class. But, like, it's a ridiculous exam because it's just straight memorization. If you can memorize it, then you're
unnecessary.
fine. And you move on. Like, that. Like, what is that? Like, that doesn't tell us anything. It tells us people can memorize stuff. Like, great.
It tells us people can memorize stuff. It doesn't mean they're going to be a quality citizen that understands society and how to operate in America.
Yeah.
Actually, most people should probably go through that exam. Can that be our new U.S.? You get your driver's license, but you also have to become a citizen every year.
Yep, that's a factor.
And it becomes a more advanced test every year.
Yeah. But, like, in social studies, like, we're actually teaching people to be thoughtful, engaged citizens, not, like, memorize random facts about the U.S. Constitution. Like, what is this? So I asked her, though. I said, you did all of this research into the impact of this transition. And in particular, like, a lot of the moms that she was learning from and researching from were first generation. You know, they had just come. And so their kids, a lot of times, are... And this was something that was repeated in not just the experience of Muslim immigrants, but, like, you know, Mexican immigrants.
Yeah, anyone who is first generation.
Anybody who speaks a different language. The kids oftentimes spend a lot of time navigating adult situations for the parents. And, like, think about all the situations. Like, I went to the hospital the other day with my child. He had to get 4 vaccines. The woman had to explain to me what the vaccines were that she was giving to my child. And granted, one of them was a flu shot, but, like, what are these things that you're giving to my child? And if I don't speak English and the doctor doesn't speak my language, right?
They're supposed to provide you a translator.
They're supposed to provide me with a translator, but a lot of times...
And they're supposed to determine that ahead of time in advance. So medical care is a little unique, but I get what you're saying.
But think about, like, you need to get in New Hampshire, you gotta get snow tires on because welcome.
Okay, so, like, that's
ice.
a scenario. They don't have to provide you an interpreter.
Like, the people who change your tires over at Wilson Tire, like, they're not...
No.
Like...
There's a lot of trust that goes into moving to a foreign country. You have to genuinely trust that the people that you are asking advice from and receiving services from are being honest with you. and providing. And then when you think about the discrimination that's happening for Muslim Americans after 9/11,
Yeah.
how would you ever trust that people are doing the right thing for you and your family?
Yeah. How do you trust
Gosh.
that price that they just quoted you
Yeah,
is a
or
fair
like
price?
a contractor's coming to do work on your home.
Yeah.
How do you even trust that they're showing up and giving you a fair deal?
Right.
You just have to.
Right. Or you, yeah.
You
so
have to have
it's
such faith in humanity.
yeah, so I asked her. I said, point blank,
Yeah.
was your research the reason you moved? And this is what she said.
To be honest, after I finished my dissertation, I thought that I put my children in difficult situation, because children in this situation will have actually three identities: the American identity, Islamic identity, and identity. The third one is between these two identities. They would, like at school, they will like keep their, it's like they will be Muslim, but at the same time, they have to go with their friends. They have to do like celebrate your holidays. This is for children, and this will really impact them. So when I finished my dissertation, I was like, I have to go back to my country because of all these reasons. But then when I went back, I felt like I miss Plymouth very much, so much. Yeah, because people over there are very nice, cooperative, although with all these misalignments, but really they cooperated with us. The cafeteria at the school, the teachers, they allowed my daughter to pray. I remember Razan, she used to do soccer, so they allowed her to wear like legging under beneath the short. So they were really cooperative. So I really miss every single thing in Plymouth. So sometimes I felt like, this was a bad decision, wrong decision. I don't know.
So it made me so happy to hear that, even though it was a factor in their move to Jordan, and we actually Zoomed, she was in the United Emirates, where she's now a professor. She misses being here. Aww. And she misses hanging out at the coffee shop with me, which, like, no offense, but I was like personally offended that she left, because like whatever. But
like, is it me?
Is it me?
Is it me you're not looking for? The coffee shop down the street. Kelsie single-handedly moves all the Muslims out of Plymouth.
No, that's not the message.
Oh, sorry. If anyone's to blame, reach out to Kelsie.
Oh my God.
I'm just kidding.
You're evil.
That's really sad. And that's the tough thing. Like, I think you decide where you want to try and live, and it's a foreign country. That's a huge risk you're taking for you and your family. And I can't imagine making it and then going back and doing something different.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
So I asked her a couple questions.
Okay.
First, what did she find in her research that was hopeful for her? And the biggest thing that her answer was that in the research that she did, she found that moms mediated the differences. And so...
Oh, yay moms.
Yay freaking moms, right? So, like, we don't celebrate Halloween, but all of your friends are celebrating Halloween. We're going to dress you up as the president, right? Like, cool. We're going to do that. Like, we can make that happen.
We can
make that happen. And she had lots of examples, and I can't remember them all off the top of my head from her research, but lots of examples, and Halloween in particular, where moms figured out a way to
make it work,
navigate that situation where they felt like they were being honest and genuine and faithful to Islam, but also helping their kids fit in at school and among their friends. With, like bathrooms at schools, we don't have bathrooms that provide the proper cleansing that Muslims tend to use.
Yes.
And so moms sent kids to school with wet wipes because that was a way that they could mediate the situation. having conversations with the people that prepare food at school, explaining what halal is, and helping people understand Islam and their practices.
I can remember being at Plymouth Elementary, and a mom came in to really dig in about Jewish culture, so that the teachers of her students knew what her children were working, and they were Hasidic Jews, so it was different than Judaism otherwise. Broadly, more popularly. And it was such a nice moment where she was so kind and sat with the teachers and let them ask questions, and the principal navigated the conversation and was like the leader of facilitating this.
Yeah.
So that's the children of this family could really come in and
be like, these people, even though they might not be Jewish, understand,
and they're going to be respectful.
Yep.
And they asked all the questions that they wanted to ask. Yeah, it's like, these are the things. So, like, birthdays in a classroom.
Yeah.
My son will not eat the cupcake.
Right.
Because it's not been made in the proper kitchen and that everything's been blessed. So they're just not going to partake. But if you can give me a heads up that there's a birthday coming up, I can make sure that he has a cupcake that he can eat so that he can participate.
Right.
It's like these little moments to keep your kid included.
Right. Yeah.
Good to know.
Good to know.
It's all about partnering.
And also, like, frankly, those types of food accommodations, like, huge. I don't think anyone here is like, yeah, you know what would be really great for my diet? Cafeteria food from a public school.
Let me take that in. Well, Michelle Obama did some work on it, but still, it lacks luster.
As a public educator who regularly
eats in the cafeteria. Not your fave?
Anyway.
Is someone in the world that has to order their lunch instead of eating where food's provided? I might take cafeteria food.
Over your own cooking?
Yeah. Pretty lazy.
So,
I mean, I'll take square pizza day any day. Oh my God. Day was always bomb.
So I finally asked her, I said, if you could fix one thing in public schools, because there's a lot of things here. There's Halloween, there's cupcakes, there's
scenarios on scenarios.
There's a million things. There's jobs in gym class, right? Where do you even start, right? So I said, okay, Suzanne, you're queen of the world for a day. And I really should be referring to her as Dr. Al Abidi, but she's Suzanne to me.
I'll scold you later.
Okay, thank you. You can fix one thing, you're queen of the world, what would you change? And this is what she said.
I recommend, like, if they have one, like, I will say Islamic class. So all children will be familiar, will know a little bit about Islam. Not too much, but a little bit. So our kids will not be asked all the time why you are covering your hair. Can I use your headscarf as a Halloween costume? Something like that. This will help a lot. Will help the teachers, the administrators, the students themselves. This will help our kids, Muslim kids, not to be asked all the time, not to feel themselves like strange or weird. I think this is, this will help in everything. If you talked about discrimination, if you talk about lack of awareness, if you talk about misalignment, now they will understand what is Islam, so they can do what these kids need.
I mean, she could have converted everyone to Islam.
Okay, that's very nice, Suzanne. But you could have gone for gold.
Gone for gold, girl.
You're the queen, lady. I don't think Queen Elizabeth was like, oh no.
What if everyone just gets educated?
I hope you take a class on Christianity, thank you.
Thank you.
No, she was like...
That was a really interesting British accent, by the way.
I don't know. I've had some wine. But I'm like, good for her, Suzanne. That's very polite. But I would have gone everyone's Muslim, welcome to my world, and then dropped some Biggie music. Or Jay-Z. They both would have fit for there. Anyways.
Oh my gosh. But it was obviously just a huge highlight to talk with her.
Yeah.
And so in her honor, I want to teach a little bit of Muslim history.
Okay. I'm in. Ready? Yeah, I like Muslim history.
Okay.
I like Suzanne, so I'm in.
Woohoo! So in the Middle East and North Africa, female infanticide prior to Muhammad was commonplace, and infanticide being killing babies when they're born, and so, you know, just being left out and starved to death or freezing to death. And Islam changed that. That was a very big issue in Islam that was addressed in the early empire. Female scholars were very common and respected. Muhammad taught that there was no difference in faith or worth based on gender, and so this makes huge room for female contributions to affairs in almost all arenas, and especially in spirituality. And that stands in really big contrast to Christianity. The first convert to Islam is his wife, Khadijah. She was a businesswoman. She was basically the money that backed him. And in that time, it makes sense that women would back him. I mean, in times of scarcity, for example, baby girls or young girls would be buried alive to try to provide for the rest of the family. Like, girls were seen as worthless. And Muhammad changes that. So, for example, it was said on Judgment Day, buried girls would rise out of their graves and ask what crime for which they were killed. This is part of the Quran that he writes in, basically. Like, what have you been doing? And this guilt trip that he basically puts the Arabian community in is very important in establishing some basic rights to live. Part of his legacy is that he ends this infanticide. So I think that's really, really incredible. Khadijah becomes the first person that he reveals the Quran to. And so if you're not familiar with the history of the founding of Islam, Muhammad has these, in early 600, has these revelations in the wilderness that become what will eventually be the text of the Quran. So these ideas, these philosophies, and so those get written down. He tells those revelations to Khadijah first. Muhammad and Khadijah live in the city of Mecca, and they have to leave. He begins preaching, and they have to leave Mecca, and so they move to Medina, which is a relatively neighboring city to Mecca. And the supporters that he has go with him, and so there's this sort of like community of Muslims that follow, and eventually, some years later, they return to Mecca and they conquer that region. And this is sort of the beginning of the warfare that the Muslim community has to do in order to solidify this religion, this faith, and to some extent save the lives of female babies. So obviously Muhammad and Khadijah have a lot of followers, and one of them was this woman named Nusayaba. She was from one of the tribes that joined him in Medina very early, so she was an early convert to Islam, and she became a companion of his. She is most remembered because she took part in the Battle of Uhud, in which she carried a sword and shield and fought against the Meccans. She shielded the Prophet with her own body from enemies during the battle, and she even sustained several lance wounds and arrows as she cast herself in front of him to protect him. So she's literally using her body to protect him. So that's pretty incredible. After she sustained her 12th wound, she fell unconscious, and the first question that she asked when she woke up was whether Muhammad was safe. So, I mean, she is literally the bodyguard to Muhammad. And so I think that one thing that's really challenging when you're thinking about Islam is thinking about Islam when it was founded and in Muhammad's lifetime, and Islam and the particular challenges of that time, right? Battling female infanticide, right? Like, you would think that those are such like basic things, but in reality, like, that's where things were at. And he's got women that are his closest confidants, that are his bodyguards. I mean, this is incredibly important. There are lists of women, and we've provided resources for people to check out about some of these badass women that accompanied him. Kuala, she was another contemporary of his. She participated in the Battle of Yarmouk against the Byzantines, and according to stories about her, she had skills and fighting ability. She was she was given a lot of credit from some of the generals at the time. And so this is, like, she's incredible. So he's got women fighting along with him. Muhammad marries his friend, Abu Bakr, who is a prominent Muslim. He marries his daughter, Aisha. And Aisha is interesting. She is his wife. She is also one of the prominent scholars after he passes away. Aisha was one of the wives that he had that had not been previously married. Most of the other wives that he took on were women that had lost their husbands in war. And so she's the daughter of Abu Bakr and becomes betrothed to Muhammad to sort of solidify this relationship. So when she reaches puberty, she becomes his wife. And when Muhammad was not around, he said that if there's any questions about Islam, please ask my wife Aisha, because she is such a faithful person. And so she becomes basically the main source of information after he dies about him. But this gets into one of the modern controversies about Islam, which is the fact that Muhammad took multiple wives, and Khadija and Aisha are just two of many women that he had as wives.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen sister wives. Different religion, but it just looks like a lot more people for housework, which I'm all in for. Do you want to be my sister wife, Kelsie?
No. I do not want to do your dishes for you.
Can you just come over and be my bitch?
No! I got my own dishes, woman! Get out of here!
Get your own sister wife. I already recruited you. No. All right, so...
but no, in all seriousness, I asked her what she thought about it. Because I said, people are going to... And my students in particular are like, okay, so wait a second. Men can take multiple wives in Islam? Like, explain. So this is what she said.
Yeah, men in our religion, they can get 4 wives. But for reasons, Kelsie. If I'm sick, sometimes some men, they like to have 1 wife. But to be honest, if I'm sick, if I'm not doing what does he like, if I'm not like him, he can get another wife. If we spend all our life fighting and we don't have the same thinking, and he can get another wife. But for Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he got many wives for different reasons. In Quran, you can find that. He married this wife because of 1, 2, 3. He married the second wife because this and this. So not just for fun.
If, no man can actually provide equally for multiple wives, so they don't know anybody who's done it.
But there's so many things I struggle with different religions where people take the text so literal. Yeah. And they live so literally with that text. And then there's others where they're like, well, that's interpretive. Yeah. And so I'm always struggling with what are you allowed to interpret? Right. And what are you not allowed to interpret? Right. And that's where I get stuck in religion.
Where do you pick up on inherent sexism? That's
exactly. It's wait a minute. Was that just the time period, or is that accurate? Do we have to do that?
Well, you're actually getting to something that's super important here, which is that it really has to do with historiography, because Muslims know more than Western people like ourselves that there are lots of different Islamic texts, and just like there are lots of different books within the Bible, different preachers who interpret things differently, and the problem with having all of these different texts is that they sometimes disagree with one another. And in Islam, that's no different. The Quran, for example, is very, creates a huge space for women. It says that heaven was at a mother's feet. And but then by contrast, there's this separate set of texts which was made in the 8th and 9th centuries. It's called the Hadith. They're a collection of documents that are written way after Muhammad is dead that demean and subjugate women. And for example, it says, men, your wives are your tillage. Go to your tillage any way you want. And then it goes on to say, men are managers of the affairs of women because Allah has preferred men over women, and women were expended of their rights. And so, like that's pretty point blank sexism and misogyny, and there's this. In the Hadith, there are all these documents that show fascination with female virginity and fear of female sexuality. And it's hard because the Hadith documents are religious texts. And so, there's even one that rewards good men in heaven, that with a horde of virgins, which I'm sure many people have heard of. But again, that text comes out of the Hadith. It doesn't come out of the Quran. And then, of course, questions that I have is the Quran makes it very clear that women are equal to men in spirituality. And so if men are getting hordes of virgins as rewards in heaven, well, what are the virgins getting? Because they also followed all the rules outlined in the Quran, right? So it's a little, you're right, like the back and forth between the texts is not okay. But I think we as Westerners really need to be aware, just like in Christianity and Judaism and other religions, the contradictions in the texts also have to do with who's writing the texts. And I think that, feminist Muslims really need to take issue with certain texts in hadiths that have been accepted by all male Muslim scholars in the centuries after Muhammad's death. Not, necessarily the inspiration behind that. Although I'm not going to sit here and justify every word of the Quran because I have not read it.
Thanks so much for listening to Remedial Herstory, the other 50%. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts to bring more voices to the conversation. We really appreciate that effort. Until next time.